Hello, Christian Church in the Upper Midwest. I am Katie Russell Hainline, the pastor of Runnells Christian Church, and I was a member of the Regional Minister Search Committee. I'm here today with Josh Patty, our new Regional Minister. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thank you for taking your time to be here today. This is an opportunity for us just to kind of introduce you a little further to the region and help them get to know you. It's my understanding that you were born and raised in Indiana.
Yes.
So does that make you a Hoosier?
It does.
What is a Hoosier?
Oh, that's a lovely question. There are, I believe, 4 main stories of the derivation of Hoosier. The truth is nobody seems to really know, even the people who for some reason study what a Hoosier is. I don't know why you would, but there are people who have done this. And my favorite story, which is the simplest and probably is not true, is that it derives from a frontier greeting where people would be coming up towards a cabin and somebody from inside the cabin would call out, "Who's there? Who's there?"
Oh, that's
And it became, I don't know.
There's a similar mystery around the origin of Des Moines.
Mm-hmm.
So welcome to your new home where we don't know what words mean. Now you've lived the past several years in Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
What is the best barbecue in Kansas City?
Well, I'm a Joe's person myself. I really like Joe's, but there are a lot of good barbecue places, big and small in KC.
If I went to Joe's, what should I get?
Ribs.
Ribs. Okay.
Now, I know they're famous for their Z-Man sandwich, which has some brisket on it and other things, but their ribs are uniform. One of the things about barbecue is that's challenging is making things in large quantities the same.
Mm.
And for anybody who does barbecue, having good, consistent ribs is a challenge, really. And their ribs are consistently excellent. Yeah.
Keep it classic.
Mm-hmm.
So you're ready to leave the land of the Royals,
Mm-hmm.
relocate to the Upper Midwest.
Well, fortunately, the internet allows you to not have to leave like you used to.
Yeah. So we're not gonna. You'll still be a Royals fan. We
Yeah.
won't make you choose Twins or Cubs.
Good.
All right. We'll allow it. What was the first thing that you learned about the Upper Midwest region that made you think, like, wow, I want to be a part of that group?
Well, in your paperwork where you introduced, here's what we're about as a region, you talked about the regional motto or vision of being disciples together. And that sums up what I think ministry is about in general, and what regional and even our general ministries as disciples really should be about, is figuring out how to be faithful together. So that really grabbed my attention from the beginning.
Yeah. So we're still kind of living into that vision. We're so excited to have you come and help us define further what that is and what that can be. As you can imagine, there's a lot of excitement about getting to know you and calling you. So I asked disciples throughout the region to submit questions for you today. And we had one question, a very important one, that comes to us from Owen Caton, one of the pastors of Ankeny Christian Church. He wants to know, Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Wars. I'm embarrassed to say, because I have so many friends who are big Trekkies. I have never been able to really get into Star Trek. I've tried about 3 times to get into different Star Trek series and movies, and it's not that I think it's bad or anything, it just doesn't grab my attention. And Star Wars, for better or for worse, I grew up with, and it's the first movie, Return of the Jedi, my father took me to see when it was in the theaters the first time.
Yeah.
And it's the first movie, I don't think it was the first movie I saw in a theater, but it's the first movie I remember seeing in the theater, so, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of a holdover from childhood.
It really is.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So other people had maybe slightly more theological questions than Owen.
There's plenty of theology in both Star Trek and Star Wars, though, so that's okay.
One question that was raised that was interesting to me is when you take a Sabbath day or when you really need some rest and renewal, what is your favorite way to connect with or experience God?
Well, the challenge is I'm a father, I'm a husband and a father, and so some of my Sabbath time now is with my wife and with our boys, and that's really important and valuable. But the challenge is I'm an introvert, and so some of my holiest and most relaxing time is being away from everybody. So when I was single especially, my Sabbaths always included, if the weather was good enough, a long walk. And if the weather wasn't good enough, a very long lunch, where I would take a book and go to a Panera or something with a kind of coffee shop setting where I could have lunch and read for a couple hours and just be by myself. That's a bad thing about introverts. I won't speak for all introverts, but I can speak for myself. I love people. I love being around people, but you wear me out. You physically make me tired. It's not that I don't love you. It's not that I don't love being with you. Sometimes even my family wears me out. And my wife is a better judge of that than I am, as you might imagine. So she sometimes will recommend that I need a long walk when I haven't thought to say I need it. And then that's a good time to not only talk to God, it's a really good time to try not to talk to God and just listen. Listen for God.
You mentioned reading, and I know that you're an avid reader. So can you tell us what you're reading right now?
What I'm reading right now? Well, there have been a spate of books about the current president that have recently been released, and I'm a political junkie, for better or for worse. These days, it's so disheartening. It can be for worse because of how contentious everything is. But so as I get those books from the library on my Kindle, I read through them quickly and get them back so the next person in line can read them. So I've been reading some of those as my hold as it comes available for me. Beyond that, I'm reading John Cleese recently released a book on creativity. Just a little short book, and I've been reading that. I've been reading, I think Diamond is the last name. I can't remember the first name of the author, who's famous for writing a book, Guns, Germs, and Steel, about why certain societies flourished more than others or became richer than others over the course of, say, 10,000 years of human history, or even more than that. Now he's looking at why certain societies, in this book called Collapse, why certain societies have failed and why others perhaps haven't. Kind of the flip side of that. So I'm reading that right now, which probably doesn't sound very interesting to a lot of people, including my wife, but I find it interesting and relaxing.
Yeah, that sounds interesting to me, but I'm a similar kind of political junkie as you. I know in the kind of vein of politics, you've talked a lot about being a student of Abraham Lincoln. What is your favorite story of Lincoln?
Oh my, favorite story of Lincoln. Well, the favorite fact that I have about Abraham Lincoln, because it surprises people, is that Abraham Lincoln is the only president that holds a patent.
Oh.
Which is surprising because Thomas Jefferson is famous for inventing things, particularly that double desk that made a copy of a letter. He had two pins that are hooked together and it make an immediate copy of whatever letter he was writing. But he never patented any of his inventions. Lincoln was always a tinkerer, and in fact, there's a part of Lincoln that's very scientific. Even as he was exploring politics in the state legislature in Illinois, he was trying to he was basically just trying to find a way to make a living any way he could on the Illinois frontier. And so he was a deputy surveyor. He thought he might become a steamboat captain because he had successfully floated flatboats with farm produce down to New Orleans to sell them and then come back. And he thought he might be a steamboat pilot or captain. He was a tinkerer. We don't really think of that with him, but when he was in Congress in the late 40s, he would visit the patent office. One of the things back then, the patent office, you could submit a model for consideration to prove that you had a new idea, and he would go and look at the models. But he came up with an idea from that idea of becoming a steamboat captain, a way to lift boats off of a shoal or a sandbar, something that got caught on in low water, which was a particular hazard in the part of Illinois where he lived. And so he came up with this patent, which is an ingenious and frankly unworkable solution in practice, to basically have balloons that you would pump up you could push down into the water that would lift the boat and then lift it over whatever was obstructing it. But anyway, so Lincoln has a patent, and he did submit a model of that invention, which I believe is on display. It's certainly in the collection of the Smithsonian. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
That's random, isn't it?
It is random. I didn't know that about him.
Yeah.
So some of our listeners, viewers, had questions kind of more about how you envision fulfilling the roles and responsibilities of the regional minister. And one question in particular was about stewardship. So I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit more about kind of your theology of stewardship, how you have seen stewardship practices work well, and how you might imagine that playing out in your role in our region.
Certainly. So stewardship, I would come at it from two ways in answering that question. The first, I'd go back to something we talked about a little earlier, which is Sabbath. I think that Sabbath is an important lesson for our stewardship, because while we think that Sabbath is about refreshing ourselves, I think on a certain level, the fact that God tells us we all can take a day off, one out of every 7 days, is a way of reminding us, and if we do it, of testifying to others, reminding others that we have more than enough. That we don't have to work 7 days a week, 365 days a year to have a good life. And that God didn't create us. And I think that's really important in stewardship, to understand there's more than is necessary. And that goes beyond finances. Finances are important. But there are more people who can do the things that you and I can do than just us. And so part of our stewardship is not only when we say, yes, I'm willing to serve, it's also recognizing there are other people who can serve as well. Frequently when I work with kids about stewardship, I do talk about we give our money, but we also give our time and our talents and our prayers. And so I think that any type of stewardship that we talk about in the church needs to incorporate all of those things. A recognition that God has given us more than enough, which means that we have plenty to share. And that God, while God has made us all different and blessed us with different gifts, part of God's generosity is that there's more than one person in almost every situation that can do that job. And there's certainly an abundance, many ways that we can pray for each other, that we can reach out to each other. So that's the type of stewardship I've always tried to share as a pastor, that I try to live out and learn to live out, because like most people, I'm still learning how to be a good steward, I think. And part of what I'd like to teach is the regional minister and get us to talk about, okay, so if that's true, what does that look like? What does our stewardship of prayer look like? What does our stewardship of talents look like? And yes, what does our stewardship from Sabbath look like?
Yeah. One of the roles that makes you most visible, most public in the region will be your role in the search and call process. That's when congregations will interact with you the most, and pastors probably too. Tell us a little bit about your understanding of the role of the regional minister in that process, and kind of how you are imagining you might take that role on.
Well, if you're unhappy with the search and call process, the regional minister is the person, man or woman, who gets in the way and makes it so it doesn't work. Let's be honest. We have colleagues, and there are congregations that are frustrated with regional ministers, whether in this region or others, because it doesn't go fast enough, or it didn't work out the way anybody wanted it to. And the hard truth is that sometimes the search process is not going to work out how we want it to. A related hard truth is it's almost never going to go as quickly as we want it to. Now, having said that, there are certainly some of our colleagues that have been in the search process for far too long. And there may be some watching this, and so I don't want to say that that is a universal truth and you should always be patient. Sometimes we do need to kick the system into gear a little bit. And there's a whole host of issues that frankly shouldn't play into that, which do too often. Whether they're of age or gender, or those are the two main ones, ethnicity sometimes as well. There are others as well that can really elongate a process when a pastor is searching for a call. Congregations, rightfully, are hopeful and anxious to have good, strong pastoral leadership, but it takes a while, the way our search process is designed. In other denominations, somebody in a regional minister's position or a bishop's position would simply say, I think this person should serve in this congregation, and it's done, unless the minister of the congregation throw up a really big stink. That's just the way it'll be, and that's a really efficient way to make it happen. But efficiency has never been our goal as disciples, right? Sometimes it seems like our goal is to be as inefficient as we can. But the blessing of our design, our system, the way we try to do things faithfully, is that we trust congregations to know better than any regional minister who a really good minister will be for them. And we trust ministers to know better than a regional minister what a good type of congregational or other ministry setting will be ideal for them. And so the challenge for the regional minister is to stay on top of it and to try to encourage both people who are searching for pastors and pastors who are searching for ministry settings to be as honest as they can, to trust the process so that we can look for good fits. That's what when I talk about the search and call process, I will always talk about a good fit. Because look, we've got a lot of great pastors, and they'll be great pastors in a lot of ways in any context, but they'll be exceptional pastors in the right context. And we have a lot of great congregations, and they will benefit from the gifts and wisdom of almost all of our pastors, but they'll really flourish under the right pastor. And so I think our system is uniquely designed, if we're patient and if we're honest, and if we keep at it, to finding those really blessed, good matches where there's a lot of flourishing. And I speak of that from personal experience because I've just come from a setting where I really flourished, and I think the congregation and many of them said the same. We really flourished. We were a really good match. But here's the thing. Before they called me, they had been in the search process for over 2 years. And they were not a tiny or a rural congregation, a situation where they didn't get a lot of candidates. They interviewed a lot of people before me, and they consistently thought, that person is a good pastor, but they're not the best pastor for us. And because they were patient, if they hadn't been that patient, we never would have met. They would have hired a pastor, they would have called a pastor long before I was in the search process, and who knows what would have happened. But that really beneficial relationship and wonderful almost 9 years that we've just spent together wouldn't have happened. And look, I'm not Pollyannish, I'm not foolish. I know it doesn't always happen. Even under the best of circumstances, we can be as honest, we can be as hopeful, and sometimes we just make mistakes. Not because we try to, we do. And then we have to be honest and say, yeah, this isn't working. And it's not because somebody was malicious about it, or they lied, or it just isn't working. Not because somebody's a bad pastor, not because it's a bad congregation, it's just not a good fit. And then that's when search and call needs to step in and say, we need to look some more. But that's a short answer for that, but it will take up a lot of my time and attention, I do know that.
Yes. I think many congregations and pastors are anxious to get your ear on that and,
I'm sure.
and chat with you. One thing that I also know about you is that you are a singer, and music's been very important in your life, obviously, in the church as well. Do you have a favorite hymn?
My favorite hymn is Great is Thy Faithfulness.
Why?
Well, I know now but it's been my favorite for a long time. Now I will say it's because I think there's something special about recognizing God has great faith in us. And I think that's part of Jesus' teaching, is showing how much faith God has in us. Usually more faith than we have in ourselves. But it's been my favorite hymn for so long, long before I could have said that. So I don't know what first brought it to my attention. I've loved it for, a long time.
It's a great hymn. Yeah. You mentioned earlier being a husband and a father, and you have two pretty young children. We are anxious to get to know your family too, and I'm so excited to have you all here. I was wondering if you could give us a couple of adjectives to describe your kids, so we might get to know them a little bit.
So I mentioned that I'm an introvert, my wife is an extrovert, and we have children, one of whom is clearly an extrovert. He is so extrovert that it was obvious when he was 1 month old how extroverted he is. That's our oldest, Caleb. He is a social butterfly. He's a charmer. He he hasn't met you, but he loves you. He just does. Never seen a kid quite so excited by other people. Just loving other people. Usually kids go through a period where they see strangers and they don't know what to do with them. They shy away from them. He's 4 and counting, and we haven't hit that stage yet with him. So he's just Mr. Social Butterfly, and unless, he's not getting his way, Mr. Joy and Sunshine. Our younger son, Isaiah, is more introverted. My wife reminds me, maybe it's a little early, he's only 1.5, maybe we can't pigeonhole him yet and say if he's... But he certainly is not the social butterfly that his brother is. But he's a little more... I think he's an introvert because he tends to be a little more obviously reflective. He'll see something, and if he doesn't, he's not seen it before, he gets this weird look on his face where he looks unhappy, frankly. He kind of purses his lips. I can't do it because it brings a smile to my face. He's not smiling. And he looks almost stern when he doesn't know what's going on and can't figure it out until he figures it out. And then he's delighted. And it can be somebody he's never met or he's only met once and doesn't recognize. It can be a food that he's never seen on his tray. It can be a program on the television that is not one of his favorites, and you have a short window where he will decide whether it's okay that it stays on the TV, or he'll let you know his displeasure. I don't know.
What kind of things do you all like to do together as a family?
We love to be outside. We've got young boys. They need space to run and jump and play. So any excuse we can find to be outside as they've been growing up. We've loved to go to the zoo, which is, so many good things at one time. You're out and about, and animals for them to discover and see what they like and see what they're curious, what makes them curious, see what scares them or not. That's fun. What else do we like to do? We like to take walks. And now that the 18-month-old is really kind of tearing along, we are able to go further and be a little bit more adventurous in the type of trails we've been on. So, yeah.
So I think I shared with you earlier that a couple of years ago at our Ministers Institute here in the Upper Midwest, Terry Hort Owens was our guest, and I was asked to interview her, and I was told to channel my inner Krista Tippett. In preparation for today's, I was told to channel my inner Zach Galifianakis in the style of Between Two Ferns. I'm going to kind of wind us down by bringing in a third party, my inner James Tipton, and ask you...
Wait, where's your stack of note cards? It's got to be about this tall.
I'm going to invite you inside the actor studio here. What is your favorite word?
Oh, gosh. Oh, that famous questionnaire. What is my favorite word? There's so many. I'll pick joy. That's the one that comes to mind right now. Joy.
What's your least favorite word?
Hatred or prejudice.
What is a sound or a noise that you love?
Well, I love a child squealing with delight, but I even love a child crying within certain parameters.
Within reason.
Yeah, something about a child.
What is a sound or a noise that you hate?
Squealing tires.
What profession, other than your own, would you like to attempt?
I don't know. I wonder sometimes if I might be a good librarian. That's not what people usually pick.
No, I was actually thinking I could absolutely see that you would be a good librarian, although I'm glad that you are not. I'm glad to have you as my regional minister.
Now, I will say here, if I was a little bit better with science, I'm not terrible with science, but it's not my strongest aptitude. When I was younger, I wanted to be a weatherman. And I still am fascinated by the weather and pay far too much attention, again, ask my wife, about weather forecasts and weather forecasting. So I would probably enjoy that too if I could get the science down.
Yeah. What profession would you certainly not attempt?
Cruise director.
That's great.
Yeah.
The Inside the Actor Studio always ends with this question, which is very fitting for us.
Yeah.
What would you like to hear God say to you when you enter the pearly gates?
Come in.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Josh. We are so excited to welcome you to the Upper Midwest and look forward to getting to know you and your family and many years of good ministry ahead together.
Thank you very much. I really appreciated this.